Today I'm flying with a giant which is literally unknown in the Western world. It operates more than 800 aircraft and carries 3 times as many passengers as British Airways. Yet it's much less known than many smaller airlines. This is China Eastern, one of the China's big 3 airlines. But all that massive scale is still mostly busy serving domestic routes. That's why internationally it flies rather low on the radar screen of many. Exploring Chinese airlines and being a bit suspicious, I first went private. For starters, I was really impressed by Hainan Airlines, smaller private carrier, of course by Chinese standards, and arguably the best in China. Then I raised the stakes and flew first class with Xiamen Air. That was a really bizarre experience. As I gained more confidence, I moved to state-owned airlines, starting with Air China. They passed, which is another way to tell I wasn't impressed, but it was clear that efficiency was more important than experience. And today I'm very curious to test China Eastern. Let's see where I will land on my China aviation adventure. One thing I can tell, it was quite an experience. Which one? You will find out soon. Today's flight is Istanbul to Shanghai on China Eastern Airbus A330. It's 4,300 miles and almost 10 hours, and I'm flying from Istanbul airport where it somehow feels I know every corner. But I caught myself thinking it's the first time I'm flying from here not with Turkish Airlines. That's definitely a hurdle for China Eastern to meet, as the comparison bar for sure will be high. Istanbul airport meets me with the familiar buzz, but I feel lost. I could navigate to fancy Turkish business checking zone with closed eyes, but where do I go with China Eastern? Their check-in desks turned out to be actually at the very end of the terminal and very modest, but it worked. There is life beyond Turkish indeed. Trying my luck with Fast Track, but not this time. Unlike few other SkyTeam airlines, China Eastern doesn't have a deal with airport-operated IGA Fast Track, so today we'll have to queue for immigration and security, which in Istanbul can take time. Well, it's not uncommon for an airline to be squeezed in an airport dominated by another airline, so no conclusions yet. Hope China Eastern will surprise me on board, which ultimately matters more. Istanbul Airport firmly sits on my list of the world's best airports. It feels more like a giant luxury shopping mall than an actual airport. Now I am to explore a different side of it, the one that's not about Turkish Airlines. My aim is IGA Lounge, which serves SkyTeam. It's not hard to find, but once I come near, I start getting a vibe of a bus station. A bit of a crowd, a bit of a chaos. All possible airlines are crammed in here with all the confusion it brings. Inside you have more of the same. There are apparently different zones, dining, relax, entertainment, but because of the crowds everything feels pretty much the same. Busy, noisy and chaotic. I'm circling around the lounge looking for a quieter spot like an eagle looking for a prey, but ultimately decide to fly away, as I concluded that having a beer outside is still a better choice. So much for the lounge experience. Well, with another ground miss, the stakes are getting higher for China Eastern. They better get the flight right. Departing from Istanbul is really 2 journeys in one, a flight itself and a walk to the gate, which can take up to 20 minutes. The airport is huge and there is no internal transportation, only your pair of legs. I walk to the very end of the terminal and here I get the first surprise at the edge of nervous tick. I see a China Southern plane. What? But then I realize that the 2 flights are boarding next to each other. Whew, that was a scare. The boarding is smooth, a pleasant contrast to check-in and lounge hiccups, and I'm on my way to my today's ride, an Airbus A330. China Eastern operates more than 50 of them, but this one is special. It has a modern one-to-one staggered layout with 32 seats in business. Rather than usual outdated 2-to-2 layout, they had since early 2000s and still keep a majority of their A330 fleet. There are only few of those new retrofitted planes, and I'm very eager to try it out. Well, China Eastern really made an effort here. This might not be the state-of-the-art business cabin, but it's a huge step forward from what they used to have on their A330s before. This is a new generation cabin with fully lie-flat seats, direct aisle access for all passengers, and a fair level of privacy. But unlike some newer business class products, it doesn't create that cocoon-like feeling. You still feel quite exposed. China Eastern is using a well-known Thomson Vantage XL seat here, one of the early next-generation seat models that evolved business flying around 2010s. A very solid product which is also used by Delta, SAS and Qantas. But here China Eastern clearly got the off-the-rack basic model with little or no customizations. The materials and finishes seem to be on the simpler side. I'm somehow torn in making my mind about this cabin. For what China Eastern A330 used to be, this is a major step forward, a modern solid product. Can I call it best in class? Well, not yet. It's a bit like when you come to Germany and you see that many taxis are E-Class Mercedeses. Feels wow at first, then you get inside and you realize this is the bare bones model where you don't have all the usual bells and whistles that give it a special experience. The form could be excellent, but the content matters too. More here to explore, but now I'm switching to this service. The usual rituals are followed properly, a wet towel and a pre-flight drink are here. A good sign, a flight attendant brings a menu, which is not always the case on Chinese carriers. On Air China and Xiamen, the menu was explained by the crew and details didn't go much further than Western or Chinese. But China Eastern prepared its own challenge. It's a menu for a full year, with 4 different meal sets which are linked through color coding to 4 groups of non-consecutive months. This is really not for an average mind, and I start feeling like a code breaker deciphering Enigma. Finally code is broken and I find the right section. For lunch I will have 2 choices of soups, 4 choices for main, with a good mix of European, Chinese, Turkish, which is actually thoughtful, and of course desserts. Then we should have something before the arrival, but I can't figure out if this would be light meal or breakfast. I will handle this dilemma when the time comes. On a single fold-out of beverage menu, China Eastern manages to put what takes 10 pages for others: efficiency over fanciness. Interestingly, some wines are marked first class only. I was just feeling so proud of being a business class passenger, and suddenly I'm reminded that I'm still second tier, even if there is no first class on this plane at all. Finally, I cannot hold a smile seeing very brief whiskey, vodka, rum, simple and to the point. You get it for free, so why ask silly questions what brand it is? Enjoy the surprise. Overall, the menu sounds right, but something tells me that reality might be slightly different with China Eastern. Well, the new cabin showed me where a China Eastern is heading, while the menu, reminded where they came from. Let's see how far they managed to get on this journey. We depart right on time, a score for China Eastern. I have another glance at China Southern, which almost gave me a heart attack, and also notice another Chinese carrier right next to it, Hainan Airlines. Might be a good idea for the next trip and a chance to try their atomic spicy cuisine. Istanbul is a kingdom of Turkish Airlines, and their red and white tails are everywhere. Turkish went a long way from being literally unknown to the larger world till early 2000s to becoming a major player with massive network and award-winning service. It's interesting what would be a journey of China Eastern. Despite its massive size, to the rest of the world it's in a very similar position today what Turkish used to be in the late 90s. For China Eastern, it all started in late 80s when China decided to break its state aviation monopoly, and China's Big Three was born: Air China in Beijing, China Southern in Guangzhou, and China Eastern in Shanghai. All still government-owned, but all went in their own ways. Air China became flag carrier and a status symbol, China Southern focused heavily on domestic routes, and China Eastern became an airline for Shanghai. It tried to balance focus on domestic markets with international network and focus on business passengers. Later it acquired several regional players and now has multiple hubs across China, but it still remains a quintessential Shanghai airline. Historically, China Eastern had what analysts call inconsistent brand image, while I would rather say they were bland. Decent planes but average cabins and comfort, average service and no any kind of distinctive positioning. In the last decades they have been investing heavily in planes while also trying to bring their service in line with their ambitions. I can see that on a hardware side they did make a progress, but I still need to be convinced about the soft product, and the upcoming launch would be the best place to start. I am fixing a tray table right away, as if doing so can bring the food faster. It's adjustable, which is a plus, but shaky, and I struggle to understand the idea behind that strange curvy shape. The usual continuation would be a white cloth is served, but in our case it's not a cloth but a paper towel, which immediately brings the vibe of a cheap diner rather than an upscale business class service. Attention to detail doesn't seem to be a virtue of China Eastern, and this is something that they will keep reminding me for the next 8 hours. Drinks come. I got a glass of Chilean Sauvignon from Frontera, a perfectly drinkable but clearly no frills wine. Comes with mixed fruits and nuts in a very Chinese plastic pouch. Enjoyed the nuts but could do without all the plastic. The meal itself starts with an appetizer and soup. You can make your own judgment, but this is not something that impresses you just by its looks. I wanted to give China Eastern their best chance by leaning towards Chinese cuisine, which they should be most competent with, but it looks like they didn't appreciate my generosity. I got a creamy fish soup, lukewarm and with fairly little flavor. The appetizer, according to menu, was supposed to be grilled shrimp with smoked swordfish, but it looked like shrimps took a day off and were swapped with salmon. The taste was okay, but clearly no time was wasted on trying to present it better. Interestingly, China Eastern provides both Western cutlery and Chinese chopsticks, which is thoughtful. It's interesting how rays of customer focus come in some places, but are totally blocked by clouds of practicality in the others. For the main course, I got chicken kung pao with vegetables and steamed rice. By now, I don't expect too much from the looks. The less expectations, the less disappointments. But what I got somehow went beyond. Either China Eastern totally managed to reimagine chicken kung pao the way no one could think before, or again the menu had some gaps with reality. Well, it was chicken in some kind of sweet sauce and it was eatable, but I had kung pao in a food court few weeks ago and I have to tell it was much better. What else? China Eastern is trying to serve a multi-course meal, so we still get fruits and mini cheese plate. It's difficult to spoil those, but they still follow the model China Eastern established earlier. They give the minimum possible option that would qualify for the "we did it." The nice surprise though is an ice cream. We get a perfect Movenpick box and this gets me in a better mood. Once the desserts come, I cannot hold my smile again. It's not a Zahar tort or some fancy pastry, it's a Kit Kat bar. Well, actually 2 of them. I love Kit Kat, but this is yet another piece in China Eastern puzzle. It's all about doing the least effort while still ticking the box. I don't know if this is the intent or just how things work out, but this is how my experience with them is shaping out. I am done with the meal. It might not be award-winning, but it was quite big after all. Full stomach makes me more relaxed and hopefully less picky. So let's explore further the seat, amenities and of course entertainment. What you immediately see is that seat is quite spacious. You also get a lot of space for your belongings. There is a big console by the window where you can place your stuff, as well as a decent storage compartment. Power outlets are right by your hand, universal and USB Type-A. Not Type-C though, which hints that this is a little older generation of seats. The remote has a built-in screen, which I always like, as it allows you to track the route while watching something on the main screen. The controls are usual, so nothing to decipher. What's good is that they are mirrored on a lower panel, which you can reach when the seat is in lie-flat position. You can argue about materials and finishes, but from the practicality perspective, this seat definitely gets the job done. But what about in-flight entertainment? The seats are equipped with an 18-inch HD touchscreen monitors, very similar to what Delta and Qantas are using. Not award-winning these days, but definitely competitive hardware. But let's see what's inside it. And here I'm up to a surprise. The media content is extremely basic. There are barely some 20 international movie titles, mostly old and somehow heavily skewed to cartoons and superhero movies. It is even worse with the series. There are just few in English and none that I even remotely heard about. Here I start feeling annoyed. I could put up with the food, but this is 10 hours day flight, you're in business and there is nothing to watch. I'm sorry China Eastern, but this is not how it works in 2026. Checking the headphones largely loses its meaning by now, as there is not much use for them. On other airlines, I could brag why don't they have a branded pair, or if Bose is better than Harman Kardon, but here we are in a class of its own. This is the most basic headphone set I have seen so far in business. It's generally what others give you in economy on long haul. But strangely here it makes sense. Since there is not much to watch, why splurge for expensive headphones? I'm annoyed, but I cannot argue with the logic. My last chance to entertain myself on this flight is to figure out Wi-Fi. It's a bit complicated and there are many clicks to make, but ultimately I get there, Wi-Fi connected. This is much further than I got in last couple of flights with Chinese carriers. It's really surprising that country which literally lives online on the ground is still struggling to figure out internet in the sky. But there is a surprise here too. We have Wi-Fi, but it doesn't mean we have internet. The connection is so slow that after 15 minutes I totally give up. The only thing it was actually good for was to fill in the landing card for Chinese immigration. As if trying to compensate for the lack of proper entertainment, China Eastern is providing newspapers. A nice touch, but probably too late for me to learn Chinese, at least for this flight. So it looks like that for a change I will have a flight where my mind is not going to be bothered by movies, surfing web or doing emails. Well, peace of mind is a luxury too, and here China Eastern delivered in full, even if not asked for. Meanwhile, I noticed something interesting. There is a small round module below the screen which looks suspiciously like a camera. Is this a hello from a big brother? Or is crew keeping an eye on annoying airline reviewers? I doubt it is a surveillance camera, but honestly I have no idea what else it could be, so if anyone knows, please let me know. And finally, amenities. Pillow and blanket were already on the seat from the start. They are big and functional, but there is no way to mistake them for Armani Casa bedding on Etihad. This is more of a summer camp vibe. There is also a pouch with slippers, check. Amenities come in a small fabric pouch which does look quite authentic. Unfortunately, the contents tell a different story. It is the purest form of business class basics. An eye mask, comb, toothbrush and earplugs. Everything is double and triple wrapped and boxed in plastic. Many airlines now turn amenity kits into collaborations with artists and fashion houses. Here it almost looks like China Eastern cooperated with an association of plastic producers. I'm done with almost everything, and at the absence of any decent entertainment, my best option is to get some sleep. This is a red-eye flight, still a daytime for me, but will arrive early in the morning, so catching some sleep is not the worst idea. I'm checking if there are any mini mattresses, but no luck. Well, not having entertainment and internet might have been a blessing in disguise. I managed to get a decent sleep instead, and now ready to check out the second meal service. Time-wise, breakfast would probably make much more sense, but we get what China Eastern calls light meal. By now I know that menu is more of a guideline than a guarantee. Tuna salad somehow turned into grilled salmon, but I did get sauteed shrimps with veggie and steamed rice. Salmon tasted like it was cooked a week ago, but shrimps were actually pretty good, and somehow this light meal turned out to be better than the main meal earlier on. Wonder if China Eastern kept the best till the landing, as it's often the last impression that stays with you. Now it's the time to conclude and to make a verdict. I came with low expectations and with all the baggage of stereotypes about China state-owned airlines. Some of them China Eastern proved wrong, but others unfortunately were still there. The airport experience was very basic, but I wouldn't give it too much weight as it wasn't their own ground. Then the plane was a nice surprise. Instead of beating up an old-fashioned 222 product, China Eastern had a proper one-to-one business cabin. And even if I could pick things here and there on lack of customization, it's still a very competitive product. Where they fail to deliver for me though is the service and attention to experience. After all these years, China Eastern still seems to be all about transportation rather than passenger experience, even in business class. Interestingly, I expected them to score higher than more rigid and formal Air China, but strangely Air China still provided a more premium and satisfying feeling. The way I understand China Eastern now is that they try to tick all the boxes, but in the most formal and minimalist way. It's there, but it's not necessarily gives you an experience. Poor in-flight entertainment options for international passengers, very weak internet, bland food, and very little attention to all those small details here and there that ultimately give you the experience. So no surprise that I came up with 3 plus out of 5. China Eastern is clearly making an effort to reinvent and to make themselves a global airline. And by its sheer size, it's as global as it gets. But doing so, it prioritizes hardware over soft product. It invests billions into planes, but still fails to notice things that are beyond entertainment, service, and passenger experience. China Eastern got all the resources they need, but while they want to go global, it seems that they find it difficult to go beyond what is needed to successfully compete at home. They are still in soul searching. If they really need to get serious about service, or pumping up new planes and frequencies will still do the job. So far, this is not something I would repeat, except for testing their flagship A350, but very curious to keep an eye if they will reinvent themselves in the next years. The ambition is there, but I don't think the metal itself will get them where they want to be.